Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving up part of your lunch hour to listen to me talk about cybersecurity in the legal industry. So basically, I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour through the type of things that you need to consider when trying to protect the data that you hold and the level of threat that data has to be protected by. So a brief bit about ourselves. I work for one of the founders of a company called Cybersecurity Partners, based in Leeds, but we operate all across the UK. We've been involved in the legal industry one way or the other since 2021. We were formed in 2016. We basically help businesses, both in and public sector organisations, understand and reduce the level of security risk. We are totally product agnostic. We are a consultancy that will help you address your security needs rather than throwing products at you. So how the next 40 odd minutes is going to work is basically we'll go through a brief introduction to myself, then we'll go through what sort of threats the legal industry faces, the type of things that you can do to help protect that data privacy and compliance regulations, and how best to implement security policies. Although it's in the name cybersecurity, we are talking more about information security. The idea that threats only come from the internet is totally false, and there is still a level of, should we say, physical threat to information and data that is held by organizations. So my name is Kevin Else. As I say, I was one of the founders of Cybersecurity Partners. I've been in the information security business for over 25 years now, hence the grey hairs. And I mainly look at data security and auditing and compliance against multiple standards, some of which we'll go into later, the ones that are relevant to the legal industry. So what are the level of threats? I could sit here and throw statistics at you and give you lots of war stories. That's not the way I like to approach things. So this is going to be, say, a very brief guide to the sort of the level of threats and why that threat is growing, rather than trying to frighten you to death. So technology is moving on, particularly in the legal industry. We've noticed certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, there's want to do a lot more about being interactive, the level of access to justice for people, both from the top level within MOJ themselves, all the way down to the small industries. But also that it's been identified that there is a security risk, basically because of the level of the sensitivity of the information that's being held. I won't read the statistics straight out to you, but basically that sensitivity of that information and the value of that information is a key thing that we need to bear in mind all the way through these discussions. So the type of threats an organization faces. Most of these you may well have heard of, but I will delve a little bit deeper. So any form of malware, a virus, ransomware, whatever the term you want to use. So any unauthorized piece of software that gets onto one of your systems to be able to pull information away from it. And that can be loaded in multiple ways, both physically, somebody putting a USB drive, into a laptop somewhere that's been left unguarded for a while, or through visiting a website or a post or whatever, they'll be able to download a piece of software that hasn't been authorized. Even if it sits there for a while, if you look into the details of a lot of attacks, that initial vulnerability and that initial download of the software may have been around for months before it's used or it's acted upon, so that it can extract information, or it just sits there waiting for something interesting to come across. Phishing emails, we've all heard of phishing. We've all done the, don't click on unauthorized links. But phishing is more of a, say, blanket approach. It tried to hit as many people as possible to reveal some information or to follow a link, but also to be able to collate some information. Even if you just happen to read an email and then delete it, is your email system sending back a message that says, yes, this has been opened. So therefore the attackers at least know that it is a used email address. So it could be useful in the future to be able to help attack somebody. And then very often that can lead to like what they call spear phishing. So spear phishing is when it's particularly tailored, and they'll normally use terminology like something really urgent or things like that. There's also a version of this called whaling, which is where it's made to look like it's come from a senior person within the organization asking to do something, be it do some transfers, or this is urgent, I'm on a train, I can't get through to the right sort of thing, can you authorize this, that, the other? Only 2 days ago, there was evidence of a Singapore financial institution that, through that approach, had lost a total of $60 million. So people fall for these things. We all try and, it's the proverbial be polite and open the door for somebody to let them come through. So we like to try and help people when we can, and if we think it's a senior member of staff, to take it outside of, shall we say, just emails and things like that. You've probably heard of smishing, which is through SMS text messages. There's quishing, which is when somebody scans a QR code that isn't quite, that leads to somewhere that may look like it's an authorized site, but it may ask you for your login details or whatever to put in. These are common in publicly posted QR codes, shall we say. And then there's insider threat. We talk about, internet crime or cybercrime, as it were, but just as likely somebody internally could be extracting information that maybe they shouldn't be, or sharing information that they shouldn't be, either accidentally or intentionally. How do you prevent that sort of level of loss of information, and what is that going to cost your organization? And then you've got state level actors. There's a lot made of state level attackers because they're highly sophisticated, have very well-tested techniques to try and break into systems, either through vulnerabilities or just through phishing. So they have the time and the effort. And then, of course, now with AI tools, people are using AI to help form more plausible phishing emails. But to be honest, the level of attacks associated with nation state actors is relatively small as against the purely criminal element who are just trying to do it to make money. So while they are there and while they are more motivated, shall we say, and more better equipped to attack your environments, they're not the largest level of attackers. They tend to be a lot smaller. So sometimes, very often, the really simple things can help secure your environment. People have very often ask me, but that's fine. How do I justify? Where's the ROI on what I'm trying to protect here? What's it going to cost me? And that's very difficult to put figures on. Some of the ransomware ones, for large organizations like some of the ones in the US, they've declared that it's cost them, millions of dollars. But I think one of the better things to look at is a reputational damage. And in the NCSC's specific report on the legal industry, from the firms that they interviewed, they said that firms lost about 31% of their clients. For a large organization, that may not mean that the company has to go under, but for smaller chambers, then that could be enough to be able to send that company into liquidation, or its cost is all relative, obviously, to the size of the organization. And the smaller firms do tend to be some of the bigger targets because it's well known that they don't have the skill sets in-house, and they don't have the understanding, shall we say, of the technology that they're using, both in-house and these days mainly in the cloud, as to how to best protect them. So, as I say, a real quick high-level view of what's the top sort of things that you can do to help protect the information. I think one of the best things is understanding what information you hold and where it travels throughout the organization, so that you're not just looking at it from we'll put walls around everything. Find the value information, put a value on each piece of information, both from a organization company point of view, but also from its sensitivity. Obviously, sensitive information, as defined within Data Protection Act, is the type of stuff that very often these people are after, but it may be just other information. Just the fact that they're a client, somebody is a client of yours, may be enough information for them to extract some funds from that client, i.e. make it look like it's you. One of the standard conveyancing things is the attack where somebody all of a sudden, just before a house sale, they get a note saying that they've changed the bank details, that the funding needs to be transferred in. So how do you validate that? How you check that, and things like that. But understanding what your sensitive information is, where it is within the organization, so that you can put an appropriate level of control on it. Doing regular checks to be able to make that those controls are in place, that stuff hasn't been left more public than it should have done, whatever that information may be. So being able to have some sort of auditing in place which goes, okay, these are the particular cases, processes, conveyances, or whatever that that people are dealing with at the moment. Just make sure that it's only the people within the appropriate team that are dealing with it, and checking that those other external controls are in place. And things like pure technology. So I've got some very basic ones: encryption, firewalls, private networks, so that when you're connecting out there in the field, that you know that you're connecting back to the right place, and that the information that you're sending is encrypted in transit. Encryption, a lot of people think encryption is a be all and end all. Yes, I'll just encrypt everything, but then you find out that somebody's extracting a piece of information and then sending it in plain text in an email because somebody needs it in a hurry. So it's knowing, as I say, the flow of that data, what the process flow is throughout the organization as to where that information is going to go and how it's going to be dealt with. My apologies, I forgot to say, if there are any questions, please, there is the Q&A or box available. Please put your questions in there and we'll go through any questions later on. My apologies, I forgot to do that. One of the key things now is obviously a lot of people aren't running their own systems, they're cloud-based. Even if you say, no, I'm not cloud-based, you definitely are. If you access your emails or company information through a mobile phone, then you definitely are in the cloud because the phone systems are effectively cloud systems, or any level of service that you have that is outside of your physical control. So it's understanding where the lines are drawn. People go, okay, yes, I'm using a cloud service now, so security is all their responsibility. Depends on the level of cloud service that you're using as to how, who has that level of responsibility. So it's understanding that responsibility. The key thing to note with this, that even right at the top, if you're just using a software as a service, such as Xero, Sage for accounting, or Office 365, things like that, your organization is still responsible for classifying the data and for securing it. You're the organization that will be fined by the DPO if that data leaks out of your cloud service. You don't hand over any responsibility. You'll see from each of the levels, depending on what level of cloud service you use, there is a different level of responsibility. And understanding that, and understanding, as I say, that whatever you do, the data is always your responsibility, is very important. So what do? What are the sort of things you can put in place? And this is, as I say, very high level view. But I think the key thing to understand is, what is your security requirements? We get requests from people to say, I need to protect my client data. Right, okay. What is it? Where is it? How many environments is it in? What level of protection do you need from it? You can secure it with the most secure encryption that has in place, but does that affect the availability? Does it affect the speed that you need that information because you have to decrypt it all the time, or whatever? And where else does that information go to? Where's it held? And if on a lot of cloud environments, it could be held anywhere in the world. Data centers are all cross-linked to be able to provide the high level of availability that cloud services offer. That's their main advantage, is that they have a lot high availability. 99.9 is Amazon's AWS's normal quote. So, but where does it go? Is it going outside the jurisdiction of whatever data protection laws you have in place, or you feel that you're compliant with? And where do the backups go? Right? The backup may be just, yes, we're doing snapshots of the data. This is your cloud service supplier speaking. Snapshots of the data that we're holding in a separate location so that you can recover easily. Fine, but where is that? Physically, where is it? Because there may be different data protection legislation in place as to where that information has been held. Do you look at certifications to be able to test your level of security that you have in place? Does it give you an advantage with customers to be able to say, yes, your data is protected to this level, and it's an internationally identified standard or nationally identified standard. So such as Cyber Essentials, such as 27001, or such as the recently certified by the ICO LOX 23. How is the data secured when it's being moved around or when it sits at rest? And the suppliers, how much confidence do you have in the security of the suppliers? Did you define your security requirements to whoever those suppliers are? Right, so somebody running your or hosting a system for you, do you know what sort of vetting they do on their staff? Do you know exactly what sort of controls they have in place? Do you get regular feedback as to how they're dealing with new vulnerabilities and things like that? One of the ones, excuse me, one of the controls that national cybersecurity centers are pushing with a lot of environments now, and in fact is a requirement of Cyber Essentials for any cloud services that you use, is multi-factor authentication. Right? Do you have the ability to do that? Do all your applications that you use in the cloud support that? Not all of them do quite yet. Yes, in the same way that we used to end up with 50 different passwords for things, you end up with 50 different entries in your authenticator tool that you install on your phone. But then all of a sudden, of course, then your mobile phone becomes a critical part of your infrastructure to be able to log into these things, or as I mentioned before, accessing emails, customer emails on your phone. The mobile phone is just another part of whatever that infrastructure that you have for passing information. And a lot of people don't consider the security of mobile phones. What level of monitoring or auditing are you going to carry out? So is your cloud service provider providing you with a level of audit to say this is when everybody, this is when people logged in, this is when people logged out? Or are you expecting them just to hold that and then you ask for it whenever? Depends on your contract with your cloud service provider, whether they're actually doing that monitoring, but defining that, say, security requirement at the beginning to be able to make sure that that level of auditing is in place will help you ensure that you're getting the right information when you might need it. Vulnerability and pen testing. So you know, new vulnerabilities happen all the time. Okay, new vulnerabilities cause, what was it, 85 million PCs to hang up, right? So they're always going to be those sort of things. Who's checking for it for both your in-house IT structures and for your external ones, your cloud hosted or you're hosted with somebody else? So the ability to be able to go, are you keeping up with the current vulnerabilities? How are you dealing with them? And also particularly with cloud services, is how have you provided when you've set up your cloud service with whoever as to how they're going to tell you if there's been an incident? Okay, do they know the channel that they come through? Do they know who they've got to contact about it? What level of information they can share back with you to be able to go, okay, this has occurred, right? And it may not be that it's something that the cloud service provider has done. It may be that one of your staff has configured something incorrectly, purely accidentally, or maybe maliciously. But how is that information passed back to you? Don't assume that because the incident happens in the cloud, it's going to be dealt with there. It's how you deal with that and the channels of communication that you set up to be able to deal with that. So we talked about general, shall we say, cybersecurity, and annoyingly, the Data Protection Act and UK GDPR use terms like ensuring that you have adequate security around around the data without actually telling you what it is. That's not what the Act's there for. So how do you ensure compliance with those? Obviously, the GDPR itself, and you would have a data protection officer, and I'll go into a bit more of the type of roles. I've already mentioned LOCS 23, which basically pulls together the type of controls that you need, which are specific to the legal industry and the legal services industry. That standard, as is recognized now by the ICO as a compliance framework, that if you ensure that that's in place, they will take that into consideration if you do have a breach. And it's one of the few industries, there are a couple more, but it's one, or legal industry is one of the few that has a specific standard for it around protecting data. So that can be something really useful to look at. What sort of levels have you got to ensure compliance with, if you do it, the LOCS standard, or at least with the Data Protection Act? How are you ensuring that you have what you feel is a adequate level of control? How are you able to show that you have that adequate level of control throughout all the places that the information travels? Okay. And as I say, the role of the data protection officer, I'll go into a bit more detail now. So if you're using multiple suppliers, like most people are these days, for particular SaaS level services, or you've got stuff already installed in the cloud at a different level, are you checking that those suppliers have the type of controls you need in place for to ensure that that data is protected to that adequate level? Have you done a data privacy impact assessment on the data, not just for one environment? What I tend to see quite often is ones that are just done for, yeah, this new system that we're putting in, here's the DPIA for that system. But that should be reflected in a DPIA for the whole organization. As I said before, and I keep coming back to understanding where the information is throughout the organization, because it's never just in one system. Okay, it will be in multiple systems, and it will be at multiple levels of access depending on the system that it's in. Do you have a record of processing? If you are a data processor or a data owner, you need to understand where that information goes and what is done with that information. This is mainly obviously around personal information, but that's the basis of most, shall we say, non-commercial legal business is with people. And it's having that, knowing that level of information, what the sensitivity is of it and where it goes throughout the organization. And the ROPA is a way to keep that record together, to be able to say it goes from here to here to here. And that will include if it goes out into a cloud service, into a SaaS service, or whatever. So when it's passed on to whoever's doing some data processing for you, that needs to be included in that record so you can show it end to end. And once again, I come back to the fact about understanding what data you've got and where it is. So a data asset list. That obviously feeds into the ROPA, which then feeds into the DPIA, so that you can understand what the impact is of a potential breach anywhere throughout your organization, anywhere throughout the process that the data that you hold has. And surprise, surprise, I've deliberately repeated training 3 times. The one thing that we find is that we're, particularly with information that moves on quickly and technology that moves on quickly, It's people understanding how to handle the data through each of those different environments. So understanding the environment that the data's in, knowing what they can do with it, knowing the level of control, particularly access controls and auditing that you have of that information. But then training people to understand and be security aware of the information that they're holding, the information that they, who they're passing that information to, right? Whether that's been justified. So a level of data handling, data classification, and out-and-out security awareness that all organizations need. Okay, everybody goes, yeah, okay, I've got to sit through a PowerPoint, once every 6 months on how to handle data. Yeah, all right, fine. It's not the type of level it needs to be at. We run, quite deliberately run workshop level stuff when we're working with clients to be able to go, you tell us where your fears are around the data, what confuses you about how you're handling this data. Make it very specific, very direct for them. Yes, there are data handling policies, there are data classification policies, but be able to relate that to the function that they're doing. Okay, there are thousands of data protection policies that you can download from that wonderful, truthful source of information, the internet. But if it doesn't relate to how somebody's doing a particular function, that knowledge isn't going to transfer. It has to be relatable. So as I say, rather than training, we do workshops. Okay. So policies and procedures, the joy of all auditors and the hatred of most of the rest of the world. Okay. If you don't document how you're going to handle the data, nobody's going to be able, you're not going to be able to say you didn't do it the way we were meant to do it. Right? And if you break those policies down into procedures and say which fit the function that the people are trying to do and make it relatable, then you have got that level of assurance further down the line that that's how your information is being treated. And then you've also got a point in time that you can then go back and go, right, let's audit against that. Is it always done this way? And procedures get it wrong occasionally, and you have to modify procedures. And like I've said, infrastructure and technology moves on and does things differently. So how do you make sure that those policies and procedures match? And the policies, everybody thinks is almost like a set and forget. So it becomes shelfware. Okay. So nobody actually looks at it. It has to be relatable. It has to fit, and it has to go all the way down to policy, procedures. So when I say a comprehensive security policy, what I'm meaning is something, as I say, that's relatable, has the appropriate number of layers that you need for your organization. Yes, it has to be pragmatic. Yes, it has to fit with the flow of information through your organization. So have that policy set, which leads into procedures, and you can have that policy to make very generic high-level statements as to what the policy is, and then the processes and procedures below there are the ones that show how it fits into the function. Okay. You've got incident response. I talked about incident handling as far as cloud services, things like that is concerned, but what do you do if you can't get online to something? What is your process and procedure? The Ghostbusters lines of who you're going to call, when something goes wrong. So building that sort of level of thought process into how you handle information, how you want people to respond, so that people know what they've got to do. Right? The biggest mistake I have seen anywhere with incident response and disaster recovery plans is, yeah, they're PDFs and they're held on this server. What do you do if that server breaks down? What do you do if the building catches fire that the server's in? You know, yes, everybody tries to avoid printing stuff off, but you need to have that plan somewhere that's going to be accessible regardless of what happens to either the system that it's on or the building that it's in. You have to think that next sort of step. And I've said, training and awareness programs for staff. Make it relatable to them, make them understand that the level of impact that even one thoughtless sending out of a email with a spreadsheet without trimming out the bits that weren't really needed. Just ask HMRC, they lost 2 discs worth of the audit data, of data that was being sent to National Audit Office, where they couldn't be bothered to strip out all the bank account details. And they still haven't found the CDs. So that's my very sort of high level guide through it. I can see I've got an odd question or 2 in the Q&A. Quite happy to take some other questions. So please just drop them in the Q&A or the chat. What I will do is mention that what we have, so because you attended today, we're quite happy for you to get in touch with us and have a free 30-minute consultation just to go through any cybersecurity or data protection concerns that you may have, just so we can set you off on the right sort of track, shall we say. But the one question I have got at the moment from Gary is, recommend Cyber Essentials for clients. I recommend Cyber Essentials to every organization as a basic set of controls excuse me, that according to all the evidence that we've seen and the evidence that we've seen in that NCSC has found, protects against about 70 to 80% of the type of attacks that they see most often. So Cyber Essentials will give you things like multi-factor authentication. As I say, that's a requirement now for any cloud services you may access. Multi-factor authentication on admin accounts. Admin accounts totally separate from user accounts. I'm simplifying it greatly, but there is some really basic sort of stuff that can be done, that if you pass Cyber Essentials at a basic level, which is a self-assessment questionnaire, then you're giving some level of guarantee both to yourselves and to your clients that you're being able to control the level of risk within your organization. Cyber Essentials is very good at making you think and making you go through it. It asks the awkward questions. Okay, it's not heavily detailed. It doesn't cover every eventuality. It is a starting point. But I think, personally, I think every company should have Cyber Essentials. That should be their basic set. Okay, hopefully that's answered your question. Are there any other questions, or is your tea and coffee all getting cold and you'd prefer to be finishing that off in your lunch hour? Okay, the contact details are on the screen. They're also in the chat. If you want to follow up, as I said, if you were an attendee today, we'll happily have a free half-an-hour session with you just to go through any concerns that you may have. One thing I will mention as well, though, we are running a couple of events for those in Leeds. Sorry, you're Leeds Law Society, of course, you're in Leeds. For Leeds Digital Festival, we're running a session on AI and the potential risks and benefits of AI across all industries. And then also later on in September, we're running our Cyber Whodunit, which is something we've been doing for about the past 4 or 5 years, which is basically helping me solve a cybercrime. An event that we will go through. It's an evening event, drink some food, that we'll go through, and it's another way that we try and do, similar to what I mentioned with the workshops, that we try and do security awareness in a fun, practical way, and it will make you think. And if you solve it, you might even win a prize. And trust me, it's not another free 30 minutes. Okay, it is. We do make sure there's actually a prize. But if there are no other questions, I will give you just about 15 minutes back of your lunch hour. And thank you for your time. And I'll say thank you for sparing your lunch hour to listen to me croak slightly. Okay, thank you.